Welcome everybody to Magic in Mind. Today I am in conversation with fabulous Erika Maizi, who some of you will know, and you'll be a new face to some people as well, Erika. So I'm going to ask you to do a little bit of introduction to yourself. Now, Erika and I have worked together for many years now. We worked together very intensively, as you were reminding me before the chat, which was just such an honor and a privilege. And I always look at it and I go, oh, we were a year apart in our birthdays, and we both got Ewas in our charts, and we share many passions, I would say, as well. The Northern tradition, astrology, and that seeking for our own, seeking for the own path, I think definitely unites us in this sense of being co-creators with the universe. And we're going to be talking about reweaving spiritual roots, which I know is so important to so many people who I speak to, where we might come from very complex backgrounds. We might have our origins in a totally different continent, and we've been moved either in our own generation or in previous generations, or we might have complex cultural roots or complex spiritual roots as well. We might have been brought up within one spiritual tradition and then found it wasn't our path. And then how do we go about that process of reweaving our own spiritual roots and feeling like they're ours? So we're, that actual rooting process, it's important that we're not flitting from one thing to another or being a tourist, a spiritual tourist, that not that like pilgrimage and finding isn't part of the journey, but how do we do that rerouting? So that's our topic today. Erika, is there anything that you would like to share in terms of your journey, what's brought you here, before we start looking at that process of reweaving? Anything that I haven't done justice to?
Thank you, first of all, for this lovely introduction, for inviting me to share this space together, for co-creating, and I will be forever grateful for you. When I was a complete seeker, I remember it so well. It was in 2017 when I reached out to you to receive my birth runes reading, and this is how our paths have crossed. And looking back of discovering that my sun rune, which stands for soul purpose, is Ewas, and I've got it like twice also as a knownness gift. This is when I started to actually recognize myself, who I am, more and more. This is how our journey, our co-creative journey started. And that's why I remember it so well.
Oh, so
Because
it's like our
this
7-year
is,
anniversary.
yes, 7-year anniversary. The lucky 7 for us.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I
Yeah,
think,
so that's how it started, and was so inspirational that I actually wrote a book, The Weaving Way, when the known started to weave through me. So this whole path, like our path, starting with the birth runes, has completely changed my life ever since. And I'm forever grateful for that.
I'm remind myself how grateful I am that the birth runes came into my life, and they're not always easy, but they are so powerful. And that's what I do this work for, is so that to support people in finding their own paths. And like you say, to open up to something and go, oh, this is what I was seeking, and then to find it. And you described so beautifully what we were discussing before the session, that I was saying that I'm seeing with the community that I work with, this sense of a journey, of an arc that might be done many times, particularly when we feel like we're woven soul, lots of different strands to us, that some of them might be unknown. We could just feel that we're being called, is that we do have to go through this process of seeking, of going out there, of finding a new edge, of being a beginner all over again, and sort of following our intuition to do that, rather than someone saying, you're going to do this or you're going to do that. So that process of seeking, and then practicing, mastering, honing, trying, however long that might take. And then in your case, sharing your book out into the world, where you wanted to share your journey with others, which is such an inspiration. And I know that so many people love your book, and you've done a second one as well, haven't you? But
Yes.
that sense of becoming, in one way or another, a guide, that you say, okay, I've been on this journey, and now I can guide others through that journey, and their journey won't be the same, but I can still guide them and support them on their path. And I recognize that not everybody becomes a guide in the sense of writing a book or doing podcasts or anything like that. But even in terms of their own community or their family or their friends, that we can be guides just simply by sharing who we are and the journeys that we've been on, and inspiring people to find their spiritual roots. So for someone who's going, oh, I have no idea. I've landed on this podcast and I'm in the seeker phase, but I don't really know how to go about it or what to do with it. How did that work for you, that seeker phase? Or does it work for you? Because obviously that's happened more than once, and you don't just work within the Northern tradition, do you either? What does it, how does the seeker manifest in your life?
This is a fantastic question. I love it. I think because as long as we live, we are seeking to, like I perceive it, like to get closer to our souls. Yeah, because we are souls in our bodies. Yeah, so forever unfolding as long as we live to learn what we came here to experience. Yeah, so for me, with the runes specifically, it started, like I mentioned earlier, to receive my birth runes. And what was specifically helpful to me, and this is how I got to know myself through being a seeker, is to work with them as archetypes or like as spirit guides, where I could use the way, like I would say, shamanic journeying, to go into the liminal space and to invite like the rune, like my sun rune Awas, like I mentioned earlier. What is it for me? Yeah. How is it showing up in my life? Or like the Noni's gift, literally it started speaking to me as the three Nones. Yeah, then I went on many journeys to invite them in. What kind of messages do you have for me? I got to know my soul song, to the Awas, which is strongly connected to the horse or to the twin horse. And then I started to chant Awas, and this is how I started to remember my soul song, that I then started drumming. And and so each time when I open myself up to receive those energies, I get closer to them. Therefore, constantly have got a new deepening revelation for me when I make space for that. And this is how I can weave it into my, for example, also my Slavic roots, yeah, which was also been very important, like the Germanic roots, working with you to get to know myself and my ancestors to the Germanic path, and the Slavic path, because I'm born in Kazakhstan. My mother is Ukrainian. It was very important for me to get to the roots, to the Slavic runes, and to get to know my Slavic, my spirit guides, which are called Russian Bereginis. Then I started to embroider them in my dress and my inner wear. Some people might know it from this community. I love it the most to invite those energy and then to embody them through creative expression, which is for me through embroidery is my, yeah, I love it very much. And so the seeker path is actually to make space for those energy to weave through me, and then finding a creative expression, how it's actually expressing through me. And this is a path which is never stopping. Yeah, so that's my path of the seeker.
And I really love that, because I can feel within that the mystic. I think we're both like mystic is, we both like self-identify with the mystic path quite a lot, but there is something for everybody when you're in the seeker phase, where the mystic is very heavily involved, and the sage as well, if you think about like collecting new information. What I'm hearing is that sense of needing to make space to open up, to be an invitation to have curiosity, and not to be afraid to be the sort of, to be ignorant, to not know. Yeah, which can be really hard in our society, where we're sort of, you learn things and you have to prove that you're a success all of the time. And when we go to a space where we're like, no idea, I'm just here and I'll try, we're not in that space. And that can feel like a regression in a sort of the society that we're in, where we go from like we're educated and then we're contributing and then we're retiring. There are these strict phases to saying no, to move back into that seeker energy. But then what I'm hearing from you is a move into creativity and practice, which is like the next phase. I'm going to ask you about that in a moment, but I had a couple of questions that I thought might be useful. Thinking about people watching this episode with us today is, when you say, I've learned not just one rune system, but 2 rune systems. For some people, they might go, oh, I find even the elder Futhark difficult just to learn them. And that might be frightening to people. Frightening is maybe too strong a word, but daunting, let's say. To say, wow, if my family tree contains quite a lot of different ancestral lines, or the land that I'm on has its own indigenous practices, and then the one that I came from has its own, and am I going to have to bring in all of these? What would you say then? Because I know that comes up quite a lot with people, as they will say, it's difficult to find the time to do justice to what I want to do and what I want to achieve. What advice would you give to somebody if they're going, yeah, there's so much out there to explore?
I think we live in times where it's generally very overwhelming, what the information which comes from the outside. So for me, my biggest lesson, and it's constantly deepening, is to really listen to my own inner guidance.
Mm.
As some people might also know, I'm journeying with cancer, even more close to death, as the doctors say, even though I don't believe in that. So I'm resting more and more as this mystic or this liminal navigator in the in-between of not knowing. But the gift of that is that I can rely only on my own guidance.
Mm.
So for me, it came true, this is necessary for me.
Mm.
Yeah, to reweave those different ancestral threads. I always perceive myself as a weaver, but I choose then consciously which threads I'm weaving or reweaving. But for another person, if they listen to our inner guidance, it's perfectly fine if it's like just working with one rune, for example. Yeah, it's very unique to each person.
Mm.
And I think the biggest lesson is to really listen to our own inner guidance.
Yeah.
This is the biggest gift anyway. Like, even the more challenging the world gets out there, the gift from that, and I experienced that even more through my cancer journey in far advanced stadium for I don't know how many years now,
Yes.
that I can rest in the in-between of not knowing, but which at the same time is full of all possibilities. And this is, of course, for me, is also what I call the weirding way, is the weaving from nothingness. Because there's also the rune weird, some people included in Elderfoot, some people not. For me, it's a very important cauldron of not knowing. But at the same time, everything gets born out of not knowing. And I receive so much nourishment, rebirthing energy, and always new messages from learning to rest in that. And this is, of course, a big gift on the path of the mystic, through the runes, working with archetypes, and also through my cancer journey.
Mm. I love that sense of like the gift of not knowing. You'll know that for me, I don't work with the weird rune, but I do work with the concept of weird. And I would think about Gununga Gap being the void in which all thing is created. I would think about that in the same way. And that sense of embracing the seeker as the one who is comfortable not knowing.
Yes.
And as you say, maybe saying, okay, so for me, as you described, the Elwaz dream was particularly important for you, and you've spent a lot of time journeying with that. And it might be that in another system, a different initiatory energy is present for you. Or it could be for somebody else that it's the feminine ancestral circle, who might contain a number of different, will contain people who have held all sorts of different traditions within them. And yet it's your circle, isn't it? You still have to get that. And I can hear how important the inner journey, and you mentioned shamanic journeying is. So before we move on to the practitioner of it, where did you learn shamanic journeying? How did you come to be someone who had that in your toolkit, so you could say, oh yes, now I'm going to journey inwards or outwards, whichever way you want to think about it, with what I've learned or seen or experienced, to find my own way with it. Right? How did that start with you? How did you become a journeyer?
This is also very interesting because most of my life, since my family left Kazakhstan when I was 9 years old, it was in 87, and moved to Germany, I was always very, very lost and very depressed, disillusioned person. And in 2017, also that I mentioned, when I got to know my birth runes, it was a very important year for me where I was really lost. I felt, I didn't know what to do with my life. It was like the climax of disillusionment as an adult. And this is where this really pain point of seeking came to reach in our birth runes. I met my Russian teacher who showed me how to embroider like a destiny towel. And through that, I had the calling, now I need to travel to my ancestral roots where I've not been, like after exactly 30 years in 87. So in 2017, exactly after 30 years of leaving Kazakhstan, it was such a pain that made me go to this call of going to be the Trans-Siberian Railway all through Russia, Kazakhstan, and Mongolia, where I also met a lot of shamans. And this is how the shamanic path started. I met a shamanic teacher, and since then, I've rewoven my path. Like ever since I've done many years of shamanic education with the Siberian shaman. Also last year with Kazakh shamans. This is another example, seeking like from my pain point, like where do I belong? Where does this pain come from? They say when the student is ready, then the teachers show up. This is how I met my shamanic teachers. And
They give you those tools that you can apply.
Yes.
In whatever context you're then in. And I think, again, that idea of the seeker being the invitation that you're there saying, like the north is room, the need, I like the need fire, and it can feel like a void. That's why some people find the north is room challenging, because it can feel painful, because when we know that there's an absence or there's a hollow or there's a calling. Open to the path of the seeker, that's the first step, isn't it, in finding that desire and fulfillment. And the one thing you can guarantee is that if you stay in your room with your doors closed, not doing anything, is that you won't find your teachers, you won't find your answers, will you? So it's whatever journey I take, I bet you anything the universe will put something in my path that meets those needs.
Yeah, but it's also like the path of being comfortable with the uncomfortable. Because it's not guaranteed that it's comfortable. And when I look at my life so far, when I'm comfortable, I never have got I don't follow my inner guidance. Then I was more satisfying the expectations of working to pay my bills, being a good mother, but then I was very unhappy. But there was not a real push in the butt, to really actually go and do that. It was almost unbearable, the pain, which then made me to truly do steps, to have a transformation, So I think notice is a fantastic rune for that. Nobody says it's comfortable. I think we would have never invented the fire if we would have not had the need to get out of the cold.
Absolutely. And that's, it's important, isn't it, when we think about ice and fire, those two elements, and if you stay too long in either of them, they do not become comfortable at all, do they? It's that the movement is then required as we weave between the two. So comfortable for so long only, perhaps.
Exactly.
So we mentioned creativity a little bit, and this was, for me, I think about that next phase where if we're seeking, we can end up being a perpetual seeker. And we'll talk about tourism, won't we, where you maybe go to the gift shop and you buy something, you look at something, and then but you don't do anything with it. You don't then to bring it into your life or shape it with your hands, or see how it's going to affect you. And so when you talk about creativity, that to me is such an important route from which we move from the energy of the seeker into the energy of the practitioner, the person who is in the doing mode of internalizing, of trying, of failing sometimes, of failing better next time. That what's the word I want to do? I'm going to leave it. I'm going to open it to you. So you've told me about creativity. Is there anything you would add about that creative process, or about that, those next steps from being a seeker to being someone who is active and doing within a tradition or within a technique?
Yes, it's again to listen to our own like inner voice. Like for me, embroidery, I never had anything to do with embroidery because I was a professional sports woman. I was brought up to only do sports, it's very male orientated, to have results, to always be the best. It's like it was communist back then. So it's this communist upbringing, to be best in school, to be best at sports, like always or very goals orientated. Yeah. But getting back to this like very big pain point in my life, I had to question everything. Yeah, but actually also doing the painful steps, like going on a journey, meeting my embroidery teacher where I never embroidered my whole life. Yeah, but following this guidance at that time was about reweaving my feminine side, which was like really suffering up until this point because I was always lived a very masculine orientated life. So to actually go out and start embroidering, which was horrible. I was not able to do that. And there was like that all these Russian women who were like really fine, yeah, and everything. It was horrible for me. But at the same time, I knew that this is my path of reweaving this feminine side, which was missing all my life.
Yeah.
And by actually doing it and accepting that I'm not perfect, it's not about being goals orientated or produce the most beautiful piece, not at all. If you look at my embroidery, it's not like about perfect symbolism, not at all. It's much more about receiving those inner guidance and to give it an expression, like which I call it like inner wear or sacred embroidery, which is completely unique to me. And it's very feminine because I find like the inner wear and the clothing, and it's very feminine and gives me a lot of freedom to now express it in my own way, which I was never able to do before 2017 at least.
Yeah. I love that image of the sort of the Russian women with their beautiful embroidery, and then you're there, did I give it my best shot type of thing.
Yeah.
And perhaps it's a really important lesson in that as well, because so many of us, that north is rune starts to burn and it starts to say the path isn't working for you, something's not working for you. And we're coming to that in adulthood, not as a child. I'm reminded of, it's really gone from my head, which is really annoying me. There's a whole group of novels and they talk about like women who would have started to learn to spin when they were tiny children. So that by the time they're 12, 13, they're already producing the most fabulous textiles and fabrics that probably me with my adult hands will never be able to achieve. That's only, I'm not saying that's not important. Of course it's important. We all want to wear lovely, beautiful clothes that don't fall off us and uncomfortable knots in weird places. But there's so much more to that art than simply producing a perfect piece that we are able to reclaim, and we're able to say, yes, this is part of my practice, that your perfectionist self might get in the way of, because you think that the point is to produce something beautiful when that's not the point. The point is to find your beauty inside you.
Yes, and to follow this guidance. As for me, I perceive it a very feminine way, the creativity. It's because I've chosen as a soul now to live in a female body, yeah, to also embody that through this creative flow. And I think this is what brings me a lot of liberation, what I've suffered from before. Yeah, being just goals like perfectionist and just going with the flow, receive wisdom, expressing it my own way. And It's very liberating. It's like the Shakti or the Yin path. Like it's very chaotic, but at the same time, it's very liberating. At least I perceive it that way.
Having seen some of your work, there is such a beauty to it. It reminds me of finishing my training as an embodiment practitioner at the moment. And I have dyspraxia, so I don't have great coordination. And I trained in ballet and tap dancing and various things as a child. And I was ballet, I was awful at, really awful. Tap dancing, I kept going for longer, but it took me much longer to learn things. It might be that I might never be, well, at this point, I'm never going to be a ballerina. Let's be clear, that's never going to happen. And yet, when I first went and did an embodiment session, a lady who I respected greatly came up to me and she said afterwards, she said, there's such power when you move. And that meant so much to me because no one had ever called me like graceful or elegant or coordinated or any of those things that you expect when talking about like dance or movement. But she talked about power. And this is why I went on to train as an embodiment practitioner, because when I see people doing embodied work, and this isn't the time to talk about the differences, but there's a fundamental difference between that and dance. And some dancers go and work with embodiment practitioners because they know the physicality of dance, they know the precision of how to execute the dance perfectly, but their soul isn't living it. The soul isn't expressing through the movement of the body, which is what I think the embodiment practice is. And when you talk about that journey that you took with the weaving and the creativity, I hear that it's an expression of my soul. That's what I found, was I discovered and embraced the feminine through this art. And then you express that in your work and it comes through so magnificently.
Thank you. At least it brings me the biggest joy. And that is nowadays like my biggest signpost. If it brings me joy, it's good for me, and then I've got like this extra energy to do it, and there is not this comparison analysis anymore. I don't have to be better than anybody else. I don't even have to compare myself. This is also the liberation, I think, which comes with that, to find our own wisdom and then to embody it, which is like the practitioner, like to do it your own way. And yeah.
Do your own way. And somebody said to me once, I think about devotion and I think about discipline. And someone said to me there once that discipline we often think about as being like a sort of punishing energy. But if you think about it as being a disciple too, like that's like being a disciple to. For me, I love spinning. I adore spinning, and I'm doing some more of it at the moment as for my current cohort with the Drazzle's Path. And my wall doesn't always look perfect, but it feels so supercharged to me, and I love it because of that. And it is that discipline, it's that being a disciple to the movement of the spindle and the fibers as they move through my fingers and the creative process. And I hear that saying there. Final thing on this sort of practitioner pathway, which I think people will be interested in, would be when you're seeking. Obviously you might seek, and as you've said, you sought through your journey to Siberia, and you sought through coming and working with me on the runes. You've done all of these different things to bring those together. In your practice, how far did those merge? So I'm thinking like literally if you were to create something, do they have the Berengi symbols in them and the runes in them, or do they stay separate for you? How does that work?
No. Like myself, like I perceive myself being woven with those different threads. This is how it's also expressed to me on many of my clothing, where you will find different roots, runes, the Germanic and the Slavic, and also completely new symbolism which come to me. Yeah. So I always see it as like a colorful patch, what is currently weaving through me. And I don't see the separation at all. For me, it's a very playful act.
Yeah. Do you see that as part of the claiming process?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think it started with really learning. What do they mean? Those different paths. And then conscious reweaving. And now I'm at the stage where it can be like very playful. Yes.
Yeah. And I think that that's a really lovely distinction for people, isn't it? Is that you might say, while I'm in my seeking phase and I'm in my starting to practice phase, I would follow the thread so that I would come to know it as itself and my experience of it. And then I'll start that process of weaving it into my own practice. Once I've done that, I don't take my surface understanding of something and then superimpose it on top of my existing practice. They're separate threads that I weave together. That I think that for me is a very important distinction, because I know there's a much wider sort of global conversation going on about appropriation, which in your case is not necessarily relevant because you were following roots that are ancestral. But for people who are saying, I'm drawn to this path, but I don't necessarily have a heritage from the land or from my language or from my family, that distinction between saying, oh, well, this is my practice, and then that person's over there is basically the same as mine, just with different, I'll just grab a little bit from it and take it, is an uncomfortable place. So for me, that feels uncomfortable. Whereas becoming a disciple of and receiving from and weaving into yourself over a slower period of time, and still being able to say, this is this tradition, that is this tradition, they're not the same, is important. It reminds me of the temple of Sulis Minerva. The Romans were particularly good at going out and saying, oh, Sulis, that Celtic goddess, probably really Minerva, isn't it? Just to it, and they would sort of smoosh them together, and we try not to do much anymore. But inside ourselves, we're woven souls, but we recognize those traditions as having their own integrity.
I think this is so important what you mentioned now, and this whole debate about appropriation, and now living in the age of Aquarius. Today officially the Pluto turned for 20 years in Aquarius, which is all about this. Yeah, we are moving into the age where everything is changing so quickly. The AI can replace us so quickly and everything quick. And I think that's just the challenge, that then those roots and the maturity of discernment, which needs to go with that, it is in danger to be lost. But I also see it as an invitation to then strengthen the skill even more, which is about discernment and honoring where we come from, but at the same time offering space for the new to come true. And this is exactly what we talked about earlier. This is being comfortable to live with the paradoxes.
Yes.
To have respect for the roots, yeah, but at the same time to not get stuck in them, because this is the only way, and making space for the new. And I think it is a maturing of a soul that is necessary, yeah, to hold space for those things. Like I always like to see with strong roots and wings and a strong center. Like even a few years back, it was always my metaphor with strong roots and wings. But now it's like the center, it's like the tree. It needs a strong center to be able to bridge those different things, yeah? And in an age where it's so overwhelming and everything happens so quickly, I think it becomes even more important to hold the center, to be able to hold it within ourselves, to then be able to serve like that in the society, and not getting this polarization which happens everywhere. But no, I honor where I come from. I honor the roots, yeah, of different traditions, but I also make space for the new.
Yeah, I love that. My blog used to be called Big Dreams Need Deep Roots, and it was that same thing about that sort of energy of we root deeper and then stretch further. Everything that we're talking about is really about that process of doing that and of weaving a strong. The trunk is strong, the roots are strong, the branches are strong, so that we can evolve and change and have resilience in those moments of discomfort. And when the dark night of the soul comes, we can say, I've weathered storms before, and I have new tools in order to do that. And I'm not the same as my grandmothers and their grandmothers, but I am standing on their shoulders. They're supporting me. Yeah.
Yes.
I love that, Erika. Thank you. That was a really beautiful reflection. And it is complicated, but you're right. I think it's, even though it's complicated, I feel as if the worst thing that we can do is to leave it to people who don't think that it's complicated, because they'll go off and do their own thing anyway, don't they? It's a little bit like, if you find this uncomfortable and difficult, then maybe you've got something to say about it that the world needs to hear.
Yes, and resting in the space of not knowing. We started our conversation with that. And I think this is a skill which we desperately need to hold, this potentiality where everything gets born out of nothingness, but being comfortable with that instead of rushing around to offering solutions to everything. Yeah. No, then you can only get born from this not knowing, because otherwise, like Albert Einstein already said, we're just like nothing new can emerge with the same systems. And I think this is a very great skill to have, to rest in this not knowing, but in a very loving, neutral, like observer role. Yeah, like that can embrace everything. And then from that, making space, but not necessarily just quick solutions, but asking good questions. Holding space, being with this liminal space. I don't understand that most people, they always want straight away to get out of it. And I know it. As a cancer patient, a lot of times the pain is almost unbearable. Of course, it's a human kind of trait. Oh, I want to get out of it. Yes, I want to get healthy, to get rid of the symptom. And this, but it's teaching me again and again, because I'm still not healthy, even though like I've done, I don't know, millions of things. The only thing I can do is to stretch yet again, to stay with an open heart with all that is. Yeah. Because I don't understand it with the rational mind. But what I can do is how I respond to it, is to still stay open. Yeah. And to be comfortable with this not knowing, the liminal space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or we could have a
I
whole...
get a lot of comfort from that.
Yes. And I think that you opened up for me a whole new train of thought, which we'll have to leave to another time, but around our reliance on the rational mind and the capacity of the rational mind to actually deal with life's greatest griefs, sorrows, challenges, loves, as well as what's happening in the world around, is, I think, questionable at this point. And we do have to go deeper. It's not that I'm rejecting the rational mind. I'm saying, think about Odin with his ravens. And the raven is the mind, isn't it? It's like thought, but there's so much more of us, and we need our wholeness, I think, to thrive in the world. We can't do it from the rational mind alone. It's sort of beyond that, its capacity.
And I love that you mentioned the ravens.
Yeah,
because Slavic runes astrology, this is my main sole purpose, is the raven, the wise one. And so I'm very close to the ravens, and they are our guides of the liminal space. Even when you see like Yugen Munin, one is for the thoughts, it goes down into the constantly the ravens are traveling into the unknown. Yeah, so it's again like such a great example for the mind to go into the unknown, to uncover, yeah, so much which is not seen, and then to bring back, yeah, to Odin. And the ravens are fantastic guides for that.
As Odin is my primary guide on my soul path, I love the ravens very much. I think that's a really lovely way for us to we're starting to sort of draw to a close now. And we've looked at the seeker energy, and we've looked at the practitioner energy, and we've started to feel a little bit into the guide energy, which is quite different, isn't it? It's to sort of get to that point of going, maybe I have got something to say or something to share, or I want to be of service with what I want to use, what I have gathered for the benefit of others as well as myself. And yeah, I'm just wondering your thoughts on that, because you might think about it as being a guided guide in some ways, you know, that we have the raven, the Ewas rune, the Varengi, to all of these different spirit guides, if you want to call them that, who are there for you. And then you in turn step into the role of guide. I'm thinking of your books, but I know there are other ways in which you've stepped into that role. But what prompts that? What prompts that sense of, I'm ready to share, be out there? To say, if you feel that my wisdom, my knowing, my journey is relevant to you, I'm here.
I'm also offering like what I learned from you, the birth runes, and also the Slavic horoscopes, which are called astrology horoscopes. I also offer regular storytelling circles, like fairy tale circles. I also offered before this very intensive, like when you receive the horoscope, to actually do the shamanic journeys, to go like with the tree to the roots, to the energies of the runes and the roots and the wings and the center, the main energies, to really get to know them like I did. So that's what I like to pass on to others, like actually what I experienced as as an opportunity for others similarly to experience that as well.
I can feel that. That's almost like the energy of gratitude there, of how could I not offer that back out into the world when I've received so much from it.
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
I love that, and I think that's such a just a really nice, almost like a quite simple way of describing what that first step is. If you go, yeah, I'm ready to step forward and to be a guide in some capacity, is if it comes from that space of gratitude and joy and wanting to share, which in many ways can feel quite different. I've been a leadership coach for a long period of time, but I've realized that my primary calling is really to work with people who might use leadership as a disguise for the fact that they want to be a guide for others. They want to help others and support others in their journeys. And that it's a calling that comes from joy and happiness. Whereas perhaps when we talk about leadership, it can come from a desire to dominate or control or somehow be seen as successful.
Mm-hmm.
People that I work with, that's not the energy that I feel from them. I feel that I want to be of service.
Yes, absolutely. Completely different than what I explained before, like being goals orientated, success and everything. And yeah, being a cancer patient anyway, those things like no longer are important to me at all. It's like letting go of all those expectations, constructs, attachments, and really more and more about what is showing up through me. If I've got the energy to pass it on in a way like it's appropriate for me, like I mentioned, but without any kind of like pushing or yeah.
Yeah. And all I can say then is, although I feel for little Erika, say having her difficult time and sort of going, oh, I feel that uncomfortableness, but I give gratitude for that because of the journey that inspired in you, that has led to so many things. That's led to us meeting and to us talking today and to you sharing your work in the world. Miracles can be born from those seeds of discomfort or challenge.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Ah.
And I'm grateful for that.
Indeed, we both are. And with that, I should say, Erika Maizi, thank you so much for joining me and for sharing with me some of your journey. And I always learn more about you and your journey when we meet, and I really appreciate it. And I hope that for those of you who are watching and listening, now that's given you some inspiration. Now let us know, like, where are you right now? Are you on the path of the seeker or the practitioner or the guide? Or are you doing all three? Has it given you something to think about in terms of where that inspiration comes from, or traveling into discomfort, all of the different themes that we've talked about? Let us know what's landed for you, what you've taken from this session. And I will share links to Erika's fabulous books and website and things under the interview as well. So look out for those in the chat box. And please, if you have enjoyed the interview, please do comment, please do share. It's much appreciated. And thank you so much for joining us. And thank you to you, Erika.
Thank you so much for you and for everybody who listened to that, for our co-creative weaving.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you very much.